This is Dallas, Texas. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated here in Dealey Plaza. Hello, I'm Edwin Newman. It was 12:30 p.m. President Kennedy was on his first official visit to Texas. The streets of the city were jammed, but Dealey Plaza was near the end of the president's route, and fewer people had gathered to watch. That November morning, when Dallas was to witness the most notorious murder in modern American history, President Kennedy had had an unusually warm welcome. As the motorcade entered Dealey Plaza, Nellie Connolly, wife of the governor of Texas, turned to the president and said, "Mr. Kennedy, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." Moments later, the youngest president in American history was gunned down. He was rushed to nearby Parkland Hospital. 30 minutes later came the announcement: the President of the United States is dead. A wave of shock and grief swept much of the world. In a few seconds, the man many believed to be the best hope of his generation was gone. All the shots were fired from the 6th floor of this building on the corner, the Texas School Book Depository. That is, according to the official inquiry. Many eyewitnesses were convinced that the fatal shots came from this area in front and to the right of the motorcade, known as the Grassy Knoll. That same day, an employee of the Texas School Book Depository, Lee Harvey Oswald, was arrested following the killing of police patrolman J.D. Tippit. Later, at the Dallas Police Department, he was also charged with the assassination of the president. Oswald was a former Marine and defector to the Soviet Union. When he returned to the United States with a Russian wife, he publicly professed support for Fidel Castro.
We advocate restoration of diplomatic, trade, and tourist relations with Cuba.
There is the president.
There is Lee Oswald. He's been shot. He's been shot.
Within 48 hours of Kennedy's death, Oswald was himself dead, shot in the basement of the Dallas Police Department by Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner. The Warren Commission, headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren, was appointed by the new president, Lyndon Johnson, to investigate the assassination. It concluded that Oswald and Oswald alone shot the president. There was no conspiracy. But doubts remained. And in the mid-1970s, a new investigation by a House of Representatives Select Committee reached a more ambiguous conclusion. Oswald was guilty, but there was a high probability of another gunman in Dealey Plaza. It was from up here on the Grassy Knoll that a Dallas citizen named Abraham Zapruder inadvertently filmed the assassination. A terrible image of the president's death was preserved for posterity. Zapruder's film, now enhanced by computer, also offers tantalizing clues about the source of the fatal shots. And what of Lee Harvey Oswald? He claimed to be innocent, a fall guy, to use his own words, just a patsy. In the eyes of the American government, he is condemned as President Kennedy's killer. Yet in his own violent death, Oswald was denied the fundamental right of every American, the right to legal representation and a fair trial. At the same time, the American people were denied the right to see justice done in the crime of the century. The trial you are about to see will be as close as possible to a real trial. There is no script, there has been no rehearsal. The judge is a real judge, the lawyers are lawyers, and the witnesses are all genuine. No actor will be playing Lee Harvey Oswald. The defendant's chair is empty. Prosecuting Lee Harvey Oswald is Vincent Bugliosi of Los Angeles. Mr. Bugliosi achieved national prominence when he successfully prosecuted mass murderer Charles Manson. Lee Harvey Oswald's defense counsel is Gerry Spence of Jackson, Wyoming. Mr. Spence has not lost a case before a jury for 17 years. He became nationally prominent when he won $10 million for the family of nuclear worker Karen Silkwood. The jury is made up of citizens of Dallas, Texas, drawn from the official court rolls. Presiding is Judge Lucius Bunton of the Western District of Texas. Judge Bunton has been on the federal bench since 1979 and is a former Texas district attorney.
Please rise. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The District Court of the Northern District of Texas, sitting in Dallas, the Honorable Lucius D. Bunton, Judge presiding, is now open pursuant to adjournment. All ye that have business before these court draw nigh, and ye shall be heard. God save the United States and this your honorable court. The court is in session. Please be seated.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Members of the jury, happy to see that you made it off the freeway today and that you arrived here. We're happy to have you. In just a minute, I'm going to call for announcements in this particular case. And I would ask, if you would please, just to listen attentively to the clerk and to the announcements by the court and the attorneys that will speak to you in just a few minutes. Mr. Clerk, if you would please call this next case for announcements.
The United States of America versus Lee Harvey Oswald.
Prosecution ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defendant ready?
Defendant's ready, Your Honor.
All right. Let me explain just a little bit about how we'll proceed during the course of this proceeding. First, we'll have opening statements. First by the government, since the burden is on the United States government to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Since they have that burden, they have the opportunity to go first with an opening statement. Then an opening statement will be made by Mr. Spence. These opening statements are not evidence. Evidence you're going to get from the witness stand or from exhibits that come in during the course of the trial or from stipulations. That's where the attorneys agree that something is a fact. That's the evidence. And it's from those facts, that evidence, that you will determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. So you may proceed, sir.
Mr. Spence, Judge Bunton, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I don't have to tell you that you've been called upon to sit as the jury on perhaps the most important murder case ever tried in this country. In any political assassination, ladies and gentlemen, almost as inevitably as death and taxes, there is always a chorus of critics screaming the word conspiracy before the fatal bullet has even come to rest. The evidence that will be presented at this trial will show that there is no substance to the persistent charge by these critics that Lee Harvey Oswald was just a patsy set up to take the fall by some elaborate conspiracy. We expect the evidence, all of the evidence, to show that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, was responsible for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We expect the defense, in an anemic effort to deflect suspicion away from Mr. Oswald, to offer theories, speculation, conjecture, but not one speck of credible evidence that any other person or group murdered President Kennedy and framed Lee Harvey Oswald for the murder that they committed. As this trial unfolds, you will see how utterly preposterous the allegation of a frame-up is. The evidence at this trial will produce a vivid and a rather stark psychological portrait of Oswald as a deeply disturbed and maladjusted man. It will show him to be a fanatical Marxist who restlessly searched for a country to embody the Marxist dream. The evidence will show that on the morning of the assassination, November the 22nd, 1963, Oswald carried his weapon, a 6.5 millimeter Mannlicher Carcano rifle, into his place of employment at the Texas School Book Depository building. The presidential motorcade was scheduled to pass right in front of that building that very noon. At 12:30 p.m., as the president's limousine drove slowly by, 3 shots rang out from the southeasternmost window on the 6th floor of that building, one of which penetrated President Kennedy's upper right back, exited the front of his throat, another entering the right rear of his head and exiting and shattering the right frontal area of his head. As the presidential limousine screeched away to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced dead, the president, his lifeblood gushing from his body, lay mortally wounded in his wife Jacqueline's lap. Within minutes of the assassination, Oswald's rifle was found on the same 6th floor, the floor from which Oswald had brutally cut down at the age of only 46 the 35th president of these United States. The evidence will show that Oswald's rifle, to the exclusion of all other weapons, was determined by firearms experts to be the rifle that fired the 2 bullets that struck down President Kennedy. The evidence will further show that just 45 minutes after the assassination, Oswald, in frantic flight from what he had just done, shot and killed Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, running from the scene of the murder to a theater where he was arrested and subdued after drawing his revolver on one of the arresting officers. Much more evidence, ladies and gentlemen, much more will be produced at this trial, irresistibly connecting Oswald and no other person or group to the assassination. I have every confidence that after you folks fairly and objectively evaluate all of the evidence in this case, you will find that Lee Harvey Oswald, and Lee Harvey Oswald alone, was responsible for the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Bugliosi. Mr. Spence?
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. For 20 years now, we have all been told that my client, Lee Harvey Oswald, killed our beloved president. And Mr. Bugliosi knows that that's what you think, that that's what we think, that that's what even I thought when I began the preparation of the defense of this case. And so I want to take a little more time than he to evaluate the history that's occurred over all of these years to determine whether or not, in fact, you haven't been carrying with you a national lie. And whether or not, in this case, you don't want to undo by your verdict a national lie. Now, one thing, folks, that we know is that you've watched him do it already. You've watched him walk up here and tell you that Lee was a commie, and we hate commies. And he's told you that Lee was a madman, and we hate madmen. And so what he has done is to look at you and say, this isn't a fair jury at all. This is a jury full of prejudice and hatred and passion that I can work with and work on. And so I will make this jury hate Lee Harvey Oswald before he ever had a trial. You understand, of course, in this case, that my client, Lee Harvey Oswald, never had an opportunity to come before you and to speak to you and to look at you and to have you look at him. My client, Lee Harvey Oswald, was slain by an assassin's bullet. He was silenced so that he could never tell you the truth. And now it's my job somehow to try to find some way to bring some parts of the truth to you. Not all of the truth, because as we discover before this case is over, the truth in this case has been concealed from us. And before it's over, you'll need to turn to Mr. Bugliosi and ask him, why haven't you, even now, even these 20 years later, why haven't you, Mr. Bugliosi, who represents the United States of America, who represents the CIA and the FBI and the Army Intelligence and the Secret Service, who represents this huge plethora of power in this country, why haven't you even now come forward with the whole truth? It's like there is a closet over here, and the closet door is locked, and we don't know what's in the closet door. And they say to us, tell us, in your defense of Lee Harvey Oswald, what is in the closet. And I say, Open up the closet door so we can give it to the jury. And you will find that when this case is concluded, the door will still be locked. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to find out in this assassination, that the key information that we need for making any kind of decision is gone. You heard Mr. Bugliosi come up and tell you where the shots were fired from. That's in dispute. There's hardly anybody in the country that doesn't dispute it. We'll find out that there is only one way, ladies and gentlemen, that you can ever determine where the bullet came from. Did it come from back or the front? Mr. Bugliosi wants to make sure that it came from the back, because if it came from the back, he can claim that it was Lee. But if there is evidence that it came from the front, it was somebody else. When this case is over, ladies and gentlemen, you'll go back to the jury room, and there will be one verdict, unfortunately, that you can return, and that is a verdict that says we don't know. We just don't know. We wish we did know. We wish the closet door were unlocked. And because we don't know, because they won't unlock the closet, because they have been unfair, because they have secreted and hidden the truth from us, we have only one choice, and that's to say that the government still, after 20 years, has refused to come forward with the facts in this sad case about our great president, and that you, therefore, as honest jurors, must return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spence. Mr. Bugliosi, call your first witness.
The government calls
You may-
Buell Frazier.
Come on, if you would, please, sir. If you'd come forward, raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in the proceedings before this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Take a seat and witness stand, please.
Be seated.
Mr. Frazier, do you reside here in Dallas?
Yes.
Directing your attention way back to October of 1963, were you employed at the Texas School Book Depository Building located at the corner of Elm and Houston Streets in Dallas?
Yes, sir.
What type of work did you do there?
Order filler?
Order filler of books?
Yes, sir.
In mid-October of that year, 1963, did a man named Lee Harvey Oswald start to work at the Book Depository Building?
Yes, sir.
And did you learn that Mr. Oswald's Russian-born wife, Marina, was living with a lady named Ruth Payne about half a block from where you lived at 2515 West 5th Street?
Yes, sir.
Did you learn from Mr. Oswald that he was living by himself in Dallas?
Yes, sir, I did.
At the beginning of Mr. Oswald's employment at the Book Depository Building in mid-October of 1963, did he ask you if you would drive him to his wife's home in Irving on Friday evenings after work and return with you on Monday mornings?
Yes, sir, he did.
And you agreed to do this?
Yes.
Driving to and from work, would you and Mr. Oswald talk a lot?
No, sir, he didn't talk very much.
What about at work? Would you see him talk to fellow workers, or would he be pretty much to himself?
He stayed pretty much to himself. He was a loner.
Okay. Now, Mr. Frazier, was there one time that Mr. Oswald asked you to drive him back to Irving that was not on a Friday?
Yes, sir, he did.
Was that on November the 21st, 1963, a Thursday?
Yes, sir.
The day before President Kennedy was assassinated?
Yes, sir.
And what did you say to him?
He asked me, could he ride home? And I said, sure, you can ride home with me anytime. And then I thought, and I said, well, why do you want to go home with me tonight? And he told me that he was going home to get some curtain rods for his apartment from Miss Payne.
Okay, so that evening after work, you brought Mr. Oswald back to Irving, is that correct?
That's
The
correct.
following morning, Friday, November the 22nd, 1963, did anything unusual happen while you were eating breakfast?
Yes, sir, it did. Lee looked, had come down to my home, and he looked in the kitchen window.
Okay, he hadn't done that before.
No, sir.
Eventually, you and he got into your car.
Yes, sir.
When you got into the car, did you notice that he'd put something in the back seat?
Yes, sir. As I was getting in the car, I noticed a package on the back seat.
Did you ask him what it was, and if so, what did he say?
Yes, sir, I did ask him, and he says, you know, that's the curtain rods that I was going to pick up from Miss Payne.
Okay. Once you arrived at the book depository building that morning, where did you park your car?
In the employee parking lot.
As I understand it, when the two of you got out of the car, he started walking ahead of you to the entrance of the building. Is that correct?
That is correct.
As he was walking ahead of you, was he carrying the bag that had been on the back seat?
Yes, sir.
Did you recall how he was carrying the bag?
Yes, sir. He was carrying it parallel to his body.
Okay, so he carried the bag right next to his body on the right side.
Yes, sir, on the right side.
Was it cupped in his hand and under his armpit? I think you've said that in the past.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Frazier, is it true that you paid hardly any attention to this bag?
That is true.
So the bag could have been protruding out in front of his body and you wouldn't have been able to see it. Is that correct?
That's true.
Mr. Frazier, I understand you watched the presidential motorcade from outside the front door of the book depository building. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you heard the rifle shots.
Yes, sir.
How many did you hear?
3.
After the shooting that afternoon, was there a roll call of employees to see if all the employees had returned to the building?
Yes, sir, there was.
Were all employees present at the time of the roll call, or was anyone missing?
Everyone was present except Mr. Oswald.
He was the only employee who was missing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. No further questions.
Spence?
Well, Mr. Fraser, do you feel like you've just been at the racetrack?
Well, sometimes, you know, you can be there, and, you know, it's an enjoyable experience.
Shall we take our time and see if we can get some facts out here? You and I have never talked together, have we?
No, sir.
This is the first time you and I have ever met, isn't it?
That's correct.
You've gone over your testimony in some detail with Mr. Bugliosi?
I've talked with Mr. Bugliosi a couple of times, but not in any in-depth.
Mr. Spence, I know...
Just a minute.
Mr.
If you're going to make any address anywhere, Mr. Bugliosi, you'll stand on your
Okay,
feet.
Mr. Spence,
Most
my
Mr.
name is pronounced Bugliosi. The G is silent. I've told you this several times.
No, if-
I know it's difficult, but I try to do it, okay?
That's the only thing that's
An
silent
Italian
about
G
Mr.
before L
Bugliosi,
silent.
Your Honor,
Please,
is the
jury will
G.
disregard that sidebar remark for any purpose at all.
Well, all right. Now, you were the FBI tried to get you to admit that this package that he was carrying was longer than the package you saw. Isn't that right?
Well, they
Now,
had
isn't
me...
that right, sir?
Let him finish his answer, please, counsel.
Yes, sir.
Well, they had me to make an imaginary bag in my mind. Now, as I stated
No,
previously...
just a minute. The
Let him
question.
finish his answer, please.
I understand.
As I stated previously, I only glanced at the package because the man had never lied to me, so therefore I didn't have any doubt to believe what he said was in the package.
And you believe that the bag that you saw that he was carrying was one that he could put under his arm and carry in his palm. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir, that's true.
And that's longer than the rifle would be if it was broken down. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Now, you didn't think that Lee was a madman, did you?
No, sir, he didn't give me that impression.
He seemed to you to be a kind of a nice fella, didn't he?
Yes, sir, he was a individual that was nice to children.
And he liked his children?
Yes, sir, he did.
And when he talked about his children, I think you said that he chuckled.
Yes, he did.
And he was concerned about his family and his wife, wasn't he, sir?
Yes, he was.
And you liked him, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I thought he was a very nice person. He always treated me nice.
Now, you heard some shots, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did.
And you thought that those shots came from the direction of the railroad, didn't you?
Yes, sir, the knoll there.
Now, let's get this kind of figured out, you and me, for the jury. Now, here's the Texas School Book Depository right here, isn't it?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you thought the shots came from another direction, didn't you, sir?
I thought they came from the knoll over here.
Well, let's just get down here. If you could just step down a minute, and let's take this marker and put an X where you think the pictures were, or the shots were.
Okay. You can see, as we already said, this is Texas School Book Depository, which is at Houston and Elm Street. And a little side street here that ran down here, and it was a dead end. Well, right down in this area here was a knoll, as they call it there.
A grassy knoll.
Yes.
Just write grassy knoll.
Okay.
Okay, and just put an X from where you thought the shots were coming from.
Okay.
You just did that. Thank you. And I don't know what exhibit number this is, but we'll take care of that with court's counsel's permission a little later. Would you just write your name up there, Mr. Frazier? So we know it was you that put it there. Thank you for your help and your assistance. That's all the questions I have, sir.
Frazier, if you would, please, if you'd step down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bugliosi, if you would, please call your next witness.
Government calls Charles Brem.
Mr. Brem. Mr. Brem, if you would, please, if you'd come forward. You've already been sworn as a witness, have you not?
Yes, I have.
All right, fine. Just have a seat over here. Witness box. Yes, sir, please. And tell us your name.
My name is Charles Brem.
Directing your attention, Mr. Brem, to approximately 12:30 p.m. on the date November the 22nd, 1963, the day of President Kennedy's assassination, were you and your 5-year-old son in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas, watching the motorcade, the presidential motorcade?
Yes, we were.
Could you tell the jury what you observed at that time and place? You're in the south side of Elm Street with your son, and tell the jury what you saw and heard at that time.
We were in approximately this area right here. As the car turned, and when I say the car, I mean the presidential car, turned and straightened out and started coming down, the first noise that I heard hit the president, and it struck him, and he raised his hand up to his neck. The car proceeded, it seemed very, very slow, proceeded down just beyond me in this area when the second shot went off, which absolutely destroyed the president's head. The car then took off in a zigzag motion down into this area when the third shot, which seemed to me to be a wasted shot, went off, which frightened me more than any of the others because then I thought it was somebody shooting up the place. I then fell on my son.
How long would you estimate, Mr. Brem, the interval was between the first and the third shots?
First and third shot, somewhere around 7 seconds.
Okay. Did you form any opinion as to the location from which the 3 shots you heard came?
I told the officers that it came from one of the 2 buildings, one of which was the school book depository, the other one over that corner, one of the 2.
You feel very confident about that?
Yes, sir, I do.
In other words, you feel the shots, you believe the shots came from behind the president, is that correct?
Absolutely.
No further questions.
Mr. Brem, have you ever stated to folks that you feel that you are possibly, that you are an expert, an authority on possibly 6 or 8 seconds in history, that you're an absolute expert in that area?
Since I can't lie to you, I'll have to say yes. I do believe I'm an expert on 6 seconds in history.
Now, Mr. Brem, I know that you saw what you saw. Have you seen the Zapruder film?
I saw it on a quick run-through. I have not studied it or any frames.
Well, let's look at it together for just a moment. Could we have the Zapruder film, the enhanced version, at regular speed? There's the sign in front of it. Now the president, he goes forward, grabs his neck. Jackie looks at him. His head goes backwards. Did you see that?
Yes.
And it looked as if somebody walked right up to the president, if you were going to describe the motion of the president's head when it was hit, walked right up to him with a baseball bat and took a full swing as hard as they could, like Babe Ruth, and hit him right square in the middle of the forehead and knocked his head back. That's how it looked, isn't it?
Oh,
Let's look at it together. We don't need to argue.
I think your example might be exaggerated.
Well, let's see if it is. Could we watch the president's head, please? Now, this time. Forward, his head. Do you think I exaggerated it, Mr. Brim?
I can't say.
I withdraw the question. Now, you've never seen anybody shot through the head before, have you?
No.
And you're not a student of biomechanics, are you?
No, most certainly not.
Were you ever a, I know you were a boy once, of course. Did you ever put a can up on the fence post and take a rock and hit it?
Yes.
If I put a can up here on the fence post and you take a rock, got a little water in it, I hope it's water. If you put the fence post up there and hit it and throw a rock at it, what direction will the can go?
Object, Your Honor.
Might I ask you a question?
It's irrelevant. There's no parallel here. A bullet as opposed to a head, and a rock, and a little piece of paper up there.
Post to wait. I'll overrule the objection at this time.
Oh, we don't need to argue about it, do we? I mean, things go accordance with the law of Newton, don't they?
No.
Well, wait a while. Is he qualifying him as an expert?
That was not attached, sir, to that thing. And if you're talking about a head moving in one motion, please attach this with a spring or something when you hit it, and let's see what happens.
Okay. Let's take my arm with my fist attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
See that spot there?
Yes.
Hit it. Hit it again.
That's
That
enough.
hurt.
That's enough. Oh,
Are you
no
sure?
theatrics, counsel, please.
All
Let's
right,
go.
sir.
Let's get off of that.
Well, Your Honor, I'm doing the best I can.
Yes.
Now, how long has it been since you've seen the Zapruder film and studied it as closely as we have with the jury just now, before you testified?
Years.
How many years, sir?
Possibly 15.
And so, would it be fair to say that the jury has as good a recollection now of those 6 or 8 seconds from having seen the Zapruder film as you?
I would say that the jury has as good a recollection of seeing something purported on film.
You question the Zapruder film as being inaccurate?
No, I question your analysis of it.
I see. Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Brim.
Thank you.
It was nice of you to come.
Thank you. You may step down. Mr. Bugliosi, if you would, please call your next witness.
Government calls Harold Norman.
Mr. Norman, if you would, please. Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
Yes, sir.
If you would, please, if you'd come forward. And I believe you were sworn earlier as a witness, were you not?
Yes, sir.
Just have a seat right up there, please. Tell us your name.
Harold Norman,
Where do you live, Mr. Norman?
Dallas, Texas.
Thank you.
Mr. Norman, in November of 1963, were you working as an order filler for
Yes.
school books at the Texas School Book Depository Building?
Yes, sir.
And one of your co-workers was Lee Harvey Oswald, is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
Did you become acquainted or friendly with Mr. Oswald at work, Mr. Norman?
No, sir.
Is there a reason for that?
We didn't have any conversations at all, so
He was kind of a loner?
owner.
On Friday morning, November the 22nd, 1963, the day President Kennedy was assassinated, did you see the presidential motorcade that day?
Yes, sir.
Where did you watch it from?
From the fifth floor.
Did you watch the motorcade with any co-workers?
Yes, sir.
And what are their names?
James Jorman, which is known as Junior, and Bonnie Ray Williams.
Exhibit D. Mr. Norman, on your left is a photograph of 4 windows, 3 of which are open, and as you can see, there are 2 men in the bottom windows. Do you recognize who is shown in this photograph?
Yes, sir.
And who is shown?
This is Bonnie Ray Williams, and that is myself, Harold Norman.
So you were in the southeasternmost window of the 5th floor of the book depository building.
Yes, sir.
And then eventually the presidential motorcade passed by, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What did you see and hear at that time, Mr. Norman?
Well, I heard a shot when the motorcade came by. The first shot seemed like the president slumped. Then I heard 2 more shots.
So you heard a total of 3 shots?
Yes, sir.
Did it sound to you like a rifle was being fired directly above you?
Yes, sir.
Was there any other reason, in addition to the sound of the rifle, any other reason why you believe the shots were coming from directly above you?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
Because I could hear the empty hulls, that's what I call them, hit the floor, and I could hear the bolt action of the rifle being pushed back and forward.
You're familiar with a bolt-action rifle?
Yes, sir.
Now, by hulls, you mean cartridge casings.
Cartridge.
How many did you hear falling to the floor?
3.
Is the sound of that bolt action and the ejection of the cartridge casings and their falling to the floor something that you're going to remember for the rest of your life?
Yes, sir.
Incidentally...
Just, excuse me, Your Honor, I haven't really made any objection about leading questions because I generally don't do that in a trial, but it'd be nice if counsel wouldn't lead him, particularly like the last one, giving him, leading him into posterity, even into eternity.
I'm going to overrule the objection at this time.
One more question. At any time in the morning of the assassination, did you see any stranger or strangers in the book depository building?
No, sir.
No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Norman.
Mr. Spence, you may proceed, sir.
Well, Mr. Norman, give us the rhythm of the sounds of these shots. Was it bam, 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 or what was it?
As I recall, the rhythm of the sounds of shots were boom, click, click, boom, click, click, boom, click, click.
Just all even?
Yes, sir.
Even. Now, you said that you heard some hulls drop.
Yes, sir.
If after it was all over, somebody had come around and said, we found 3 nails, big nails, or 3 big screws, or something of that nature, the sounds that you heard would have, of the things hitting the floor, would have been consistent, would have sounded like about anything metal dropping. Isn't that true?
I can't say.
I mean, had you ever heard, you never had heard metal cases from a gun drop over your head before, had you?
I told you what it sounded like to me.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When was the last time before the assassination that you'd ever heard a rifle eject a shell?
I can't say the exact time, sir.
Never had heard one, had you?
Yes, sir. I've heard some.
Well, you tried to get you to say, the FBI in this case, that you heard the shots from right above you, but you didn't say that, did you? You didn't say you heard the shots right above you, did you?
No, I said I heard the shots above me. I didn't say it directly. I just only said I said the shots above me.
Yeah. They were trying to get you to say something different, weren't they?
Yes, sir.
And you resisted, didn't you? You didn't want to have words put in your mouth,
No,
did you?
sir.
And you don't want me or anybody else to put them in your
No,
mouth
sir.
in this hearing, isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, you thought there was an armed man upstairs, right?
I thought there was a man upstairs.
Well, you must have figured he was armed because you were hearing shooting and shells falling all over the place. Isn't that true?
I heard 3, sir.
So let's see if we can start again. You thought there was an armed man up there, isn't that right?
I can't say. I thought.
Didn't you think there was somebody up there
I
with a gun?
thought there was somebody up there, sir.
With a gun, all right. You didn't run and get the hell out of there?
No, sir.
You never did call down for the police?
No, sir.
You stayed up there for 15 minutes just watching the crowd after that, isn't that true?
I can't say exactly what time it was, sir.
You stayed up there for quite some time watching the crowd afterwards, isn't that true, sir?
I stayed up for a while.
Yes. And you left about 2 o'clock?
Yes, sir.
So everybody was absent, isn't that true?
After they let us go home, everyone was absent.
Everybody finally left the building?
With the permission of the officers.
Yes. That would include my client, Mr. Oswald, isn't that
I
true?
don't know, sir.
He wasn't there either, was he?
I never did see him anymore, sir.
Yes. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
All right, fine. Thank you. Call your next witness.
Government calls Eugene Boone.
Boone, if you would, please, if you come forward. You've been sworn, have you not?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just have a seat right there. Tell us your name.
Eugene Boone,
Where you live, Mr. Boone?
Abilene, Texas.
In 1963, Mr. Boone, were you a deputy sheriff of the county of Dallas?
Yes, sir, I was.
And at approximately 12:30 p.m. on the date November the 22nd, 1963, the day of the assassination, do you recall where you were?
Yes, sir.
And where was that?
In front of the sheriff's office at 505 Main Street.
Did you hear any shots around that time?
Yes, sir, I did.
Would you please show the jury where you were at the time you heard the shots, where you ran to, and what you did when you arrived at that area?
Generally, I was in this area right here. I ran down Main Street and around this cement works across this grassy area here, and then eventually over this the fence and the cement wall embutment here into the freight yards.
This is the famous grassy knoll area right here.
Yes, sir.
Can the jury see this? There we go. Did you find any evidence at all of a gunman having been in that area right there?
No, sir.
I'm talking about the grassy knoll area and the railroad yard area behind the grassy knoll area.
No, sir. As I recall, there were cars parked in this area right here. This area here, there was a flower bed in this area here. I did examine the flower bed and the foliage in this area and down this area here, and could see no footprints in the flower beds that had recently been turned, or was there any indication of any powder burns, anything like that on any of the foliage that we could see.
Okay, you may resume the witness stand. After you searched the area about which you've just been testifying to, Mr. Boone, I understand you went to the 6th floor of the book depository building and searched that floor with other law enforcement officers. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit number 11. Now on the screen is a photograph, Mr. Boone, of stacks of cartons or boxes near a window. Do you recognize what is depicted in this photograph?
The boxes on the inside of the southeast building, southeast floor of the 6th floor of the school book depository, southeast corner.
When you arrived on the 6th floor, is this the way the cartons were stacked around that window?
Yes, sir.
So you could almost say there was a sniper's nest around that window.
Yes, sir.
How long after the shots that you heard did you arrive?
Excuse me. But it seems to me, Your Honor, that this man has been leading all morning, over and over again, even to the point that he had one witness led into what he would remember forever. And I object to that. Now, I just want the record to show that I object to that. And if you want me not to make any further objections on that kind, I'd like the record to reveal that you've instructed me not to do that, not to make any more such objections, and I'll not make any. But I want you to know that I do object to the continuous leading questions of counsel.
Keep on your feet, Mr. Spence, if you would, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Spence, my ruling is you can make any objection that you want to. Don't ever tell the court that you're just standing up and you know that it is a waste of time because you don't get any of them. I don't just decide, except on the basis of the law as I feel it is, whether your objection is good or whether it's bad. as to what it looked like. I sustained as to what it looked like. You can make your description on that part only. Thank you, sir. You may be seated.
Now, may I have a ruling on my objection, please?
Yes, sir. I sustained as to what it looked like, as to the sniper's bit.
May I have a ruling on whether or not it was leading?
It was leading.
Thank
Yes,
you, Your
sir.
Honor.
Thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Bugliosi.
What do those cartons and boxes look like to you?
It looked like an attempt to hide something on the other side.
If someone had been walking on that 6th floor and someone was behind those boxes, could the person behind the boxes have been seen?
They would be concealed from either the elevator or the stairwell across the building.
Exhibit 12. Next on the screen is another photograph. Do you recognize what is depicted in this photograph?
Yes, sir. It's the area between the row of boxes on the previous exhibit, and the window looks like a place where a rifle could rest.
Those boxes look like a gun rest.
Yes, sir, as I remember them.
Did you eventually spot a rifle on the 6th floor, Mr. Boone?
Yes, sir, I did.
Exhibit 14. Do you recognize what is depicted in this photograph?
Yes, sir. The rifle?
The rifle that you saw on the 6th floor.
Yes, sir.
Is that the way the rifle looked when you found it?
Yes, sir.
When you first looked at the weapon, Mr. Boone, did you mistakenly take it for a 7.65 millimeter Mauser?
Yes, sir.
And why did you think it was a Mauser?
Well, Mauser basically refers to a bolt action, and there were a lot of military weapons around at that point in time.
Is Mauser kind of a generic term for a bolt-action rifle?
Yes, sir.
You are not an expert on firearms.
I am not.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. No further questions.
Mr. Spence?
Thank you.
You may inquire.
Well, how you doing, Mr. Boone?
Very well, thank you, sir.
I want you to help me make some sense out of some of this, if you would. You were the one that found this gun, is that right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, not to belittle you in any way, well, you just happened to be there, but anybody could have found that gun, couldn't they?
If they were looking in the right direction, yes, sir.
I mean, anybody that went up on the 6th floor looking for something would have had to been blind not to see it. Isn't that right, sir?
No, sir.
I mean, there it is. That's the way you saw it. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
And so, do you think that that's the way somebody who really was trying to hide a gun would hide a gun? Or do you think, Lieutenant, that that's where a gun would be left by somebody who wanted a gun to be found?
I'm sorry?
I mean, they took enough time to create a so-called sniper's den of boxes, didn't they?
Yes, sir.
Don't you think they would have taken sufficient time, unless they wanted the gun to be found, to find a place to hide the gun where you just couldn't walk right up and see it? For example, right in there. Well, all right. Now, about the shells. You found shells up there, didn't you?
Officer Luke Mooney found some cartridge
Three
cases.
cartridge cases, weren't there?
Yes, sir.
Right out in plain sight, in front of anybody that wanted to see them, right in the so-called sniper's den. Isn't that true?
Behind the boxes, yes, sir.
And don't you think that anybody who was attempting to perform an assassination, who would indeed set up a sniper's den, would have taken the time to pick up 3 cartridges so they couldn't be connected with his rifle? Doesn't that seem reasonable? Or do you think, officer, or did you consider the possibility that the 3 cartridge cases were left there, like the rifle, so that they could be found? Did you give that some thought?
No, sir.
Could we have Exhibit 13, please? Now, Exhibit 13 shows us the so-called sniper's den, doesn't it, officer?
Yes, sir.
And the circles are around where those shell cartridges were plainly found. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that a rifle of the kind involved in this case, may I, Your Honor?
You sure it's unloaded? You may proceed.
Absolutely. I've looked in this both directions.
Thank you.
Isn't it true, officer, that a rifle of this kind ejects the shell to the right?
Yes, sir, generally.
Well, generally, or doesn't it always eject the shell to the right? Have you ever seen a rifle of this type eject the shell to the left?
Let's see the weapon. This should eject it to the right, to the
Not
to the
generally,
top
but
right.
in every case. Isn't that true, officer?
Yes, sir.
But in the case in point, part of the shells were ejected to the right and part to the left. Isn't that true?
The way it appears there.
Does that stand up in accordance with your idea about where cartridges would have naturally come from the rifle as the party shot out the window? Or does it more properly match a situation where somebody threw cartridges to be found?
I don't know.
Now, a Mauser, you know, is considered to be a much better gun than a Mannlicher in a general sense. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
That is, it shoots better and it shoots faster, doesn't it?
Well, it shoots better. It's a more accurate weapon.
And a Mannlicher, Italian Mannlicher, on the other hand, like the one involved in this case, is actually considered by those who are experts in firearms as a piece of junk. Isn't that true?
I would think so.
Thank you. That piece of junk that we just looked at cost about $21. Isn't that right, sir?
I really don't know, sir.
And so far as you're concerned, at the time, that gun that you saw in the stacks was a Mauser, isn't that right?
At that point in time, yes, sir.
And it wasn't until after a certain gun in the possession of the FBI suddenly turned out to be a Mannlicher that it changed from being a Mauser to a Mannlicher. Isn't that true?
I would say that's an accurate statement.
Yes,
sir.
thank you. And isn't it true that you, Officer Boone, were never later able to identify the rifle that you found at the Texas School Book Depository as the one that was later shown to you as being the gun involved in this assassination? Isn't that true?
That's correct.
Now, you say you went to the railroads and did some searching there?
Yes, sir.
And you went to the grassy knoll?
Yes, sir.
And you went there because there were many, many people told you that they heard shots from that direction. Isn't that right?
There were several people, yes, sir.
And you knew that a lot of people ran in that direction, didn't you?
No, sir.
Do you have, could we have the clip, please, of the film, the Hughes film? You see people running toward the grassy knoll, sir?
Yes.
There were scores of them, were there not?
Yes, running in the direction of the grassy knoll, that's correct. Also in the direction of the assassination scene.
Now, you said you checked the area of the grassy knoll for powder burns?
Yeah, we checked the foliage, yes, sir.
For
And the
powder
flower-
burns? For
and the
powder
flower
burns? How did you
Yes,
check
sir.
it? Visually?
Yes, sir.
Well, did you find any?
No, sir.
Do you think you would have been able to recognize powder burns in the foliage if you had seen it?
I believe so, sir.
Did you find any powder burns up on the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository?
I did not.
Did you know of anybody in the history of the world who found any powder burns up there?
Not to my knowledge, no,
Thank
sir.
you, sir. Judge, thank you very much. Thank you Officer, I appreciate your testimony.
Yes, sir.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Redirect.
Very briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Boone, did the FBI ever show you a rifle which they said was a rifle found on the 6th floor?
Yes, sir.
And what did you say when you looked at that rifle?
It appears to be the rifle that I saw on the 6th floor of the school book depository.
Well, didn't you just tell Mr. Spence that you could not identify it?
I could not identify it positively because I did not have an identifying mark on the weapon.
Okay, but it appeared to be the same
It
rifle.
appeared to be the same
Ask and
weapon.
answer.
Thank you. No further questions.
Did it appear to be a Mannlicher?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. You
That's
may
it.
step down. Thank you very much, Mr. Boone. Call your next witness.
Yes. Marion Baker.
Baker, if you would, please, if you'd come forward. I think you did. In fact, I know you did. You were sworn earlier as a witness, were you not, sir?
Yes, sir, I was.
Fine, thank you. Just have a seat right over here. Tell us your name, please.
Marion L. Baker.
Directing your attention to the date November the 22nd, 1963, the day of the assassination. Were you a police officer with the Dallas Police Department?
Yes, sir, I was.
Were you assigned to ride a motorcycle in the presidential motorcade that day?
Yes, sir.
The presidential limousine eventually turned left on Elm from Houston Street?
Yes, sir, it did.
What's the next thing that happened?
At this time, I heard 3 shots.
Exhibit F. With the pointer, would you please show the jury on the diagram approximately where you were on Houston Street when you heard these 3 shots?
Okay, about this area right here.
All right, and you heard 3 shots at that point. Do you have any sense as to where these shots were fired from?
Approximately this building here.
The book depository building?
Yes, sir.
After you heard these 3 shots, what's the next thing that you did?
I rode my motorcycle to the northwest corner, right about here,
All right,
and parked it and ran inside.
all right. Exhibit H, Mr. Baker. Now on the easel, Mr. Baker, is a floor plan purportedly of the 2nd floor of the book depository building. Do you recognize this floor plan as being the 2nd floor?
Yes, I do.
With your pointer, would you indicate to the jury what happened when you reached the 2nd floor landing?
Right here on the 2nd floor landing, as I came out of the stairways, there was a door facing me. And through this window in the door, I saw a movement. And then I went over and opened the door, and I saw this man walking away from me.
What did you say to him, if anything?
I called to him and said, come here. He turned around and started walking back towards me.
Okay. Was Mr. Truly at your side?
Yes, sir. Mr. Trudy was at my side.
That's the superintendent of the building?
Yes, sir, it is.
Did you ask him who the man was?
Yes, sir, I
He
did.
told you it was Lee Oswald.
Yes, sir.
Did he appear out of breath?
No, sir.
Do you recall how he was dressed?
No, sir.
Mr. Baker, other than Lee Harvey Oswald, did you see anyone else at all on the 2nd floor?
No, sir.
You may sit down, sir. Mr. Baker, as I understand it, at a later time, March the 20th, 1964, you timed how long it would have taken Mr. Oswald, if he had fired the shots from the southeasternmost window of the 6th floor, to have gotten down to the 2nd floor lunchroom where you confronted him. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You determined that Oswald would have had enough time to get to where you confronted him. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. No further questions.
Mr. Spence?
Thanks, Judge. Mr. Baker, let me see exhibit, the photo of the man in the door. Can you show me that one? See the man in that picture?
Yes, sir.
You know who that is?
No, sir, I don't.
Have we got a blow-up of that, please? 21A. See the man in the doorway?
Yes, sir.
Do you know who that man is?
No, sir.
Look like anybody you ever saw before?
Resembles Oswald, but I don't know him.
You know whether or not that wasn't taken at the time of the shooting?
No, sir, I don't.
Let's go back again, look back, and that photo before, and see if we can't see the presidential limousine in the foreground. I won't belabor it any further. Let me ask you another question. When you got to the Texas bookstore, Lee was in the lunchroom, wasn't he?
Yes, sir.
And may I have exhibit 20A? Was he inside the room that we're looking at now?
Yes, sir.
He wasn't running.
No, sir.
But did he seem excited?
No, sir.
Seem nervous?
No, sir.
Well, a man who is neither excited nor nervous nor panting is not exactly acting in a way you would expect somebody who had just seconds before killed the President of the United States by shooting him 3 times with a Mannlicher rifle.
Is
Isn't
this
that
final
true?
summation now, or is this cross-examination?
Just a minute, if you will.
Yeah, I object. It's final summation. He's not going to have anything to say during his final summation, Your Honor.
Well,
That's
we'll
what he's been
overrule
doing in
the
his
objection.
cross-examination.
You can answer the question, yes or no.
Do you remember the question, sir?
Did he act like a man that just shot the president? We can
No,
get it
sir.
a lot quicker. Thank
No,
you.
sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker, for
Any
coming.
redirect?
No further questions.
Thank you. You may step down. Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. Call your next witness.
The government calls Ted Kellaway.
If you would, please, sir, if you'd come forward. Mr. Callaway? Mr. Callaway, if you would, please, if you'd come forward. Have a seat right over here in the witness chair, if you would, please, sir. Have a seat there, please. Tell us your name.
My name's Ted Callaway.
Thank you.
Mr. Kellaway, your present occupation, sir?
I'm a used car dealer.
Okay. Directing your attention back to the date November the 22nd, 1963, the date President Kennedy was assassinated. Were you employed as the used car manager at Harris Brothers Auto Sales located at 501 East Jefferson Boulevard in Dallas?
That's correct.
Around 1:15 p.m. on that date, will you tell the jury where you were and what you heard at that time?
I was standing on the front porch of our office, and when I heard what sounded like 5 pistol shots.
Okay. Could you pick up the pointer there by your right hand and indicate on the diagram where you were when you heard the shots and where the shots appeared to be coming from?
I was right here on this porch,
All right.
and the shots sounded like they were coming from this direction on 10th Street.
Okay. Now, when you heard these shots, what did you do at that point?
I ran out to the sidewalk on Patton Street.
Okay. Would you use your pointer to point out the locations involved?
Yes, I just ran from here out to the sidewalk.
Okay. Again, with the pointer, would you tell the jury what you observed at that point?
I saw a man running from this front yard on 10th Street across the street, which would be the west side of Patton.
Did he have anything in either of his hands?
Yes, sir, he had a pistol in his right hand.
Okay. How was he carrying the pistol?
He was carrying it in a raised pistol position,
Would you demonstrate that for the jury?
like this.
Did he run past you where you were?
No, he ran toward me. I
All
was
right.
on the east side. He was on the west side of Patton.
What's the closest you came to him?
The FBI measured it at about 56 feet.
Okay.
And
Did you get a good, clear view of him?
very good view.
Did you talk to him at all?
Yes, sir.
What'd you say to him, and what did he say to you, if anything?
I hollered at him. I said, "Hey, man, what the hell's going on?" And he slowed almost to a halt, turned in my direction, still had his pistol this direction. He said something to me, which I couldn't understand it. Then he proceeded to run toward Jefferson through this front yard right here and proceeded west on 10th on Jefferson Street.
Let's take a look at the photo of Oswald. Looking at Lee Harvey Oswald, is he or is he not the man that you saw that day?
That's the man, yes, sir.
Any question in your mind about that, sir?
None whatsoever.
Okay, you may sit down here. Thank you. After the man ran past you, after Oswald ran past you, then what did you do, sir?
That's what I ran toward the corner of 10th and Patton, and to see what was going on, and that's where I saw the police squad car and Officer Tippett lying in front of the squad car.
Did he appear to be dead at that time?
He did.
And what did you do?
I leaned over and felt his pulse at his throat. Then I got on, found no pulse, and I got on police radio and told them that an officer had been killed. They told me, yes, they'd already heard about it, to stay off the air.
Mr. Calloway, on the night of the Tippit murder, did you go to a lineup at the Dallas Police Department around 6:30 p.m.?
Yes, sir, I did.
How many men were in the lineup?
4.
Were all 4 men of the approximate same age, height, and weight?
They were.
What happened when the 4 men stepped out in front of you?
Well, I recognized Oswald right away as a man that I'd seen running down Patton.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Spence?
Now, Mr. Calloway, you did perform a lineup, isn't that true?
Went to the police line?
They did a lineup, didn't they?
Right.
And before they let you identify this, do you think they were being totally fair and open about it?
They sure were.
I mean, they didn't give you any hints of any kind, did they?
No, sir.
I mean, they didn't say anything to you that would lead you to believe that the man that you saw was the man who was supposedly killed the president, did they?
No, sir.
They didn't
I can tell you
say
exactly what they said.
They didn't say...
Wait a while. He has something to say, Mr. Spence.
Yes, he
Just
said
a moment.
he answered it.
No, but
He answered the question. I'm going to overrule Mr. Bugliosi.
He didn't say to you, quote, that officer didn't say to you, quote, we want to be sure, we want to try to wrap him up real tight on killing this officer. We think he is the same one that shot the president. And if we can wrap him up tight on killing this officer, we have got him. Didn't they say that to you?
That is almost word to word what the Chief of Detectives Will Fritz told me, but he preceded his remark was, but be sure, take your time, get a good look at him, do not make an identification unless you are absolutely positive.
And then after he gave you that, he said, we want to be sure, we want to try to wrap him up real tight on killing this officer. We think he's the same one that shot the president.
Right.
And if we can wrap him up tight on killing the officer, we have got him. He told you that, didn't he?
Sure did.
You think that's a fair and impartial way to make a lineup on somebody? I mean, if you were standing in the lineup, innocent, charged of a crime, and somebody said, we want to wrap him up real tight because if we can show he killed the officer, we got the man who killed the president, do you think you'd have got a fair shake?
I'd like to add one thing.
Please.
We had already asked him if they thought it was the man that killed the president.
Could you
And it was in response to that question that he said they thought it was.
Was he dressed like the others in the lineup?
About the same.
About the same. Let's see the pictures of the lineup, please. Is that the others in the lineup?
I don't recall exactly what the lineup was. I wasn't looking to see if they were dressed alike. I was looking for the man that I saw.
And let me see Exhibit 27A. Think that's a picture of Lee Harvey Oswald as you saw him that night?
Yes, sir.
Did he have any marks on him?
When I saw him at the city hall that night, he had some marks on him.
Well, look at the picture here. You say this is the man that you saw at the lineup. Can you see anything on his face that indicates to you that he had a black eye?
Not a very good picture, but I can see that probably something happens to his eye, yeah.
Yeah. Did you notice it that night?
No, sir.
Don't you think that it's pretty apparent that the police wanted you to identify the man who looked different, the man who had a black eye, the man who had cuts on his face, the man who wasn't dressed in suit and tie? Don't you think that was pretty obvious to you?
No, sir, it sure doesn't.
Didn't you want to help the police wrap this up good and tight against this man whom they told you was the killer of the president?
No, sir, I wanted to do just exactly what the chief of detectives told me, to take my time to be sure and to be absolutely positive in making my identification.
Do you think you could have made the identification if you'd have had 4 men standing in a line, 56 feet away, like you were, all of them the same size, all of them wearing a white T-shirt, all of them with identical marks on their face, a cut over their eye, a black eye, marks. Do you think that you would have then been able to make the identification?
I could have made it, sir, if they'd been naked.
Well, you were never given that chance, were you, sir?
No, sir, I wasn't.
21A, please. You recognize the man there?
Faintly, vaguely.
Who is it?
It's a resemblance of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calloway. You may step down. Call your next witness, please, sir.
The government recalls Buell Frazier, Your Honor.
If you would, please, if you'd come forward. I can assure you it's not going to take this near as long as it did last time, Mr. Frazier. Just have a seat. You're the same person that testified here earlier this morning, are you not?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Frazier, I'm sorry I had to call you back to the witness stand. Exhibit 21A, can we have that on the screen now? Mr. Frazier, this fellow here in the doorway of the book depository building, do you know who he is?
Yes, sir.
And who is he?
That's Billy Lovelady.
And who's Billy Lovelady?
Billy Lovelady, it was a employee of Texas School Books.
Okay. Were you standing near Billy at the time that photograph was taken?
Yes, sir. I was standing back up in the shadows there where you can't see me up several steps back, but I was in the shadows and he was standing down in front of me.
And this is when the presidential limousine was driving by?
Yes, sir.
Does Mr. Lovelady resemble Lee Harvey Oswald?
No, sir, except one thing. They both had kind of a high forehead.
Right.
But one was short and stocky, which Billy was, and Lee Harvey Oswald was more of a thin type frame.
You speak in the past tense. Billy has passed away.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
And you, excuse me just a minute, Mr. Frazier. You may have some additional cross-examination.
You were way back in the shadows, you say?
Yes, sir, I'm back in the shadows there.
How far back, sir?
Oh, there's, I would say 3 or 4 steps back up there in the shadows.
Like about the distance between, say, you and me?
No, sir.
A little closer?
A little closer.
About like this distance?
Come right about in there, sir.
And you recall these 23 years later that Mr. Lovelady was standing in front of you at that precise moment, about 4 steps in front of you. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is.
Have you ever said that to anybody in the world prior to today?
I don't know where anyone asked me that or not.
Yeah, but my question is, did you ever tell that to anybody in the world prior to today?
Not that I know of, sir.
But you did tell that to Mr. Bugliosi with the G silent, didn't you?
Well, I answered his question a while ago, sir.
Yes. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. You may step down. Call your next witness.
The government calls Jack Brewer.
Yes, sir. If you would, please. If you'd come forward. He's been sworn. Mr. Brewer, if you would, please, sir. You've been sworn, have you not?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. Where do you presently reside, Mr. Brewer?
Right now, I presently reside in the city of Austin, Texas.
Okay. Mr. Brewer, directing your attention to Friday, November the 22nd, 1963, the day President Kennedy was assassinated, were you the manager of Hardy's Shoe Shop at 213 West Jefferson Boulevard in Dallas?
Yes, that's correct.
How did you find out about the assassination, Mr. Brewer, that day?
I had been listening to the presidential arrival and the parade on transistor radio, and then they broke in and said that the president had been shot.
About 45 minutes or so later, that is around 1:15, in the afternoon. Was it also reported over the radio that a police officer had been shot in the Oak Cliff area of Dallas?
Yes.
Is Oak Cliff the area in which your store was located?
Right. Yes.
Would you describe what happened after you heard on the radio that an officer had been shot?
Shortly after that, there were police cars, sirens, I heard, that were traveling down Zangs and Jefferson Boulevard.
Westbound on Jefferson?
Yes.
All right.
And a short time later, this man walked into the lobby of my store.
Did you get a good look at his face?
Yes, I did.
How far away were you from him?
Probably around 10 feet.
Okay, A2, photograph Mr. Oswald. That's Lee Harvey Oswald, of course. Is he or is he not the man that was standing in front of your store on the occasion in question?
Yes, that is.
Okay, could you describe his physical appearance?
Well, his hair was somewhat messed up. He looked as though he had been running. He looked scared.
Okay, did you feel there was anything suspicious about him apart from his physical appearance?
Well, the fact that he was standing and facing me with his back to the street while all of the commotion was going on outside, I thought that quite unusual.
Did you get the impression that he was trying to ignore the police sirens?
Exactly, yes.
Did the police cars eventually make a U-turn on Jefferson and start going eastbound?
Yes, they made their U-turn, and when they did, Oswald, or the man that stepped into the recessed area, looked over his shoulder, seemed to make sure that they had gone by, and then stepped out back onto the sidewalk and walked up toward the Texas Theater.
How far is the Texas Theater from your store?
It's in the same block, approximately 50 to 60 yards.
So he started walking towards the Texas Theater. What did you do at that time?
I stepped out from my store and stood on the sidewalk and watched him walk up toward the Texas Theater and saw him enter the theater.
And about how far away were you from him at that point?
I was still in front of my store and watched him enter the theater.
Okay. And thereafter you
After
proceeded
he entered
towards
the theater, I walked up to the theater, asked the cashier if she had seen him or in fact sold him a ticket. She said no, she hadn't, that she had been out on the sidewalk too watching the police cars.
Okay. What's the next thing that happened?
I went inside and the gentleman that worked the concession was there. I asked him to go with me. We looked through the balcony, through the lower floor. I did not see him. We went back to the cashier and I told her that I had not seen him, but I felt he was still there and to call the police.
What's the next thing that happened?
I went back and stood by the exit leading out into the alley behind the stage. A few moments later, I'm sorry?
What happened next? I'm sorry.
Just a few moments later, the house lights in the theater came on. I looked out from the curtain and saw Oswald for the first time in the theater. As the house lights came on, he got up from his seat, walked to the aisle, and then turned around and sat back down approximately the same seat that he had been occupying.
Okay. What's the next thing that happened, sir?
After I saw Oswald, then I heard a noise outside. I opened the exit door. I was grabbed by the policeman. In fact, a gun was held on me. I explained to them that a suspect or a suspicious person was in the theater. They asked me to point him out, which I walked out on the stage with a couple of policemen, pointed him out, and the policeman approached him, walked down the aisle toward him, approached him. As the policeman walked into the aisle that Oswald was sitting in, Oswald stood up. He hollered something. I'm not sure what he hollered. And he struck the officer, knocking him backwards. As he had done this, he reached under his shirt and pulled out a revolver. The officer stood back up. Having been knocked down, he stood back up and grabbed at the revolver. There was quite a scuffle there for a few moments. And he was handcuffed and led away.
No further questions.
Now, Mr. Brewer, you, by this time, the time that you noticed Lee out there, I take it the sirens were going. You knew that the president had been killed. You knew that Tippett had been killed. And you were one of the good citizens of Dallas who was alerted. Isn't that true, sir?
That's correct. Yes.
Now, Lee, when you saw him in the window of the store, looked suspicious to you, didn't he?
He did, in fact, yes.
Now, you see, the implication from your testimony is that he had shot Officer Tippett and shot the president and was scared and was running away and trying to hide. Let me give you a hypothetical, a different set of facts.
Right.
Supposing Mr. Oswald, this man you saw in the store, turned up to be, instead of the guilty person, a patsy. Now supposing that we have such a man that realizes that he has been a patsy, and now he doesn't know what to do, you see him. Now when you see him, would the expression on his face that you saw, that is one of fear, be consistent, not only on the one hand with a man who had killed the president, but on the other hand, a man who was innocent but was set up as a patsy?
I would imagine the expression would probably be the same.
Be the same. And one of the things that he cried out, just simply cried out, is that I'm not resisting arrest. Isn't that true?
After they had handcuffed him and were leading him away, he said a couple of times, I'm not resisting arrest.
And they hit him, didn't they?
They did.
And he was trying to protect himself by saying, I'm not resisting arrest, didn't he?
Yes.
Thank you. Did you get a chance to look at the man's face as they hauled him out of the theater?
Yes, I was no more than 3 or 4 feet from him as they took him out.
You never will forget it, will you, Mr. Brewer?
No, I won't.
It was a man that was in abject terror. Isn't that true, sir?
He was in terror and a state of confusion, yes.
Thank you very much. When those officers converged on Lee in the theater, you heard one of the arresting officers say, "Kill the president, will you?" Didn't you?
I testified, yeah, I did, yes.
But he was in there purportedly escaping from the Tibbetts murder, wasn't he? I mean, that's what people said, is that he must have run in there to hide from the Tibbetts murder. Isn't that right?
I'm sure he must have, yes.
And yet the officer at the time, the arresting policeman, said, "Kill the president, will you?" How? Did you tell that to the House Committee?
I did. I said that I don't know that it was the arresting policeman. I heard someone, I couldn't even identify who it may have been. I did hear somebody say, "Kill the president, will you?"
So somebody had already, without apparently any evidence, put those together. Isn't that true, sir?
Evidently.
Thank you.
All right, fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Brewer. You may step down.
Thank you.